Welcome to Drinking Bros, presented by GhostBed.com. Welcome to Drinking Bros, kids. From time to time, we have other shows on that we're gigantic fans of. Today is the Underworld podcast with hosts Danny Gold and Sean Williams. You guys have one of the most fascinating podcasts out there, and it's crazy as shit. So we wanted to have you guys on the show today, just because we're fans, dude. We're fans of the show. Thank you for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
For the kind words, too.
Oh, yeah. Look, the kind words will obviously fall.
Yeah, we always start out kind, and then as our listeners have come to see, it ends poorly.
Then it descends into madness. Yeah. But luckily, that's what your show is. I mean, you guys cover like the crazy shit on the planet. You guys were both journalists and then started this show during the pandemic. Tell everybody how you guys got together. And were you guys bros before all this started?
Nah, dude, we've never met. Everything we do, Sean's based in Berlin, I'm in New York, and everything we've ever done is over, Skype and WhatsApp and all that. Basically, both of us kind of moved in the same circles. We're both freelance journalists. Sean's like an amazing guy who writes for magazines all the time. I was a reporter and did a bunch of documentaries. I worked for Vice for a while, doing a lot of stuff in the Middle East, conflict stuff, organized crime, stuff in El Salvador like MS-13. And, being a freelance journalist these days is not really something that works pretty well. And I had the idea, true crime podcasts are so popular, but there's not a lot in organized crime, right? And How many times can you hear the same story about some dude who kills his wife in the trailer park so he can start dating the sister, and the bumbling sheriff messes up the DNA? There's about 1,000 podcasts like that. We wanted to go in a different niche. Both of us have covered crime across the world, done a lot of reporting on like almost every continent besides Antarctica. I had this idea, especially when the pandemic hit, you can't travel. Why don't we start telling some of these stories? And every time I was doing research for an episode, Sean's name would come up. Like I'm looking into a crazy Nigerian cult traffickers. Sean's written an article on it. Mm-hmm. I'm looking into Bombay mafiosos. Sean's written an article about it. So a mutual friend one day when I was talking about needing to find a partner was like, yo, talk to Sean. Kind of fate brought us together. And then we've been running with this ever since. We're almost coming up on a year, I think.
I think it's almost exactly a year now, yeah.
What are you guys going to do for your anniversary?
Yeah, have you guys thought about that?
Well, maybe you can get over here, Dan. Then we can actually do a show in person.
Yeah.
Like these guys at the studio and everything.
Berlin and do stuff that we can't talk about on the podcast for legal reasons.
Yeah.
That's wild. You guys have never met before, but the format, though, makes sense. We just did it with another show on our network, Failure to Stop. One guy is in Detroit. The other guy is in Raleigh, North Carolina. I just thought they would be a good fit together and put them together. I think that's the smartest way to do it. In particular, with a podcast like this that is so detailed, you really can't afford just to get some novice on where you're like, hey, do you really know what the fuck went on over there? Were you actually there? Because if you do, the audience comes after you on shit like this, especially true crime and history.
Yeah. I mean, I needed someone, I needed someone who knew the subject matter, could do the research, could write, and had a British accent. And Sean fit all those sort of...
And then you settled on me. Yeah.
So let's start with your craziest episode. What was the wildest one you guys have done so far to you? We have our own, Drinkin' Bros and all the shows we do over here. We've done over 2,000 episodes at this point. We have our own for different reasons because of some circumstances that went on maybe behind the scenes or whatever. But with you guys in these, true crime genres, what was the craziest one that shocked you the most that you guys have done so far?
So, Sean and I, not all the episodes are stuff that we've personally reported on or been to, but a lot of them are. And my favorite is Sean did a story, I think for GQ in the UK, about hunting the $1 billion meth lab in the jungles of Burma. And that's my favorite one that we've done.
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead. I want to hear this story. There's something about meth trafficking in Southeast Asia, which is not what you think about, right?
No.
People don't think about it, but this guy, Seichi Lockett, I think he got arrested in January, this Canadian Laotian drug dealer. He's worth $17 billion. And El Chapo's worth $2 billion.
Yeah.
So that gives you some idea about how insanely huge.
I mean, at his adjusted for inflation, at his all-time high, the what's his name? Lucky Luciano's guy.
Yeah.
He was worth what, 158 billion or 158 million? I'm sorry,
158 million.
Yeah, something like that. So 17 billion for a drug trafficker. That's a lot.
Lots.
Even what was Pablo? I think it was like 3 or 4 billion was his worth.
Yeah, something like that. It's nowhere near like the stratosphere that this guy's in.
Jesus
he kind
Christ.
of like runs the entire country of Burma, and supplies pretty much half the world with its meth, and people like meth.
People love meth, and I'm surprised because it doesn't have a great end ever.
No.
Yeah. Like, I've never seen somebody come off of meth and be a better person where they're like, holy shit, dude, you're not going to believe this. But I solved COVID and I was on meth and I just figured it all out and now I'm good. I'm going to put it down and never return to it. Now with Burma, whenever somebody brings it up, I automatically think of Rambo.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking of. That's a pretty gnarly movie right there. It was like I think there was a break of like 15 years, and then they did the one where he goes in, and I think he's fighting with the Shan or the Karen or one of the rebel armies at that point. And it's, like bayoneting babies and throwing them onto a fire. It's pretty gnarly.
It's an intense Rambo, but all of them are, and they all hold a special place in my heart. Did you actually go to Burma for that one?
Yeah, well, I had a bit of an odyssey, right? So I got sent out there, I think like a couple of years ago by my editor in GQ in London. And he sent me out to go to this like casino that's run by a Chinese, basically this giant Chinese like kingpin who runs meth from China into Burma and the other way around. And I got to this casino, and it's just it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. Like there's like brothels full of underage girls. There's people eating snakes and tigers in restaurants. It's all run to Beijing time. They like use Chinese money. The place is insane. But then someone there tells us about this thing called like the machine, which is like this gigantic, beyond all expectations meth lab. And then me and my photographer and another guy we were with, we just become singularly obsessed with finding this fucking machine. And then we spend 3-4 weeks on the road going into the bush in eastern Burma on the Chinese border. And TLDR, we didn't find the $1 billion meth lab, but my editor graciously let me go back out there and look for it. And I didn't find it again, but I did get a pretty damn good story, and it involves me like sleeping rough on the Mekong and getting pretty fucked up along the way. But it's an insane story.
Now, from your experience over there and just common sense, like human common sense, there's no way any of this is happening without the CCP knowing about it, right? Like the Chinese Communist Party knows about this shit. There's no way that a guy's making $17 billion along their border without them knowing about it. Yeah, did they get a cut of that?
Well, I mean, one of the earliest drug barons there was a guy called Kansar, and he was a warlord drug baron in kind of the 70s and 80s, I think it was. He established pretty much an army, and he was backed fully by the Chinese at the time. Now the Chinese have these kind of proxy guys called the Wa out in eastern Burma, and they make tons and tons, like billions of ecstasy pills, meth pills, basically. It's pretty rough. And when we were driving through this area, there were like 15-year-old kids with like 1950s guns with bayonets on them, with like, they looked like they were wearing their dad's pajamas, all these old fatigues and shit. So yeah, the CCP does know about all of this stuff. In 2014, I think they had a lot of their own homegrown problems, so they just kind of shifted it to the borders and let the Burmese do it for them. But the Chinese do like their meth as well. I mean, everyone likes their meth. That's the conclusion.
Well, I mean, when your livelihood is literally tied to your output.
One thing that unites us all.
What's that?
I was going to say meth, like loving meth. It's just the one thing that unites all cultures and people.
Well, hey, maybe that's what we need to be focused on. Then,
yeah. Right? Kylie Jenner was giving out Pepsis. Maybe we should just give out meth.
Maybe we should send that dude, what's his name? Something Aaron Paul or whatever from Breaking Bad over to Afghanistan right now and give the Taliban meth, and then we'll see what happens.
Good optics. Yeah.
Or Jesse Plemons or what's his name?
Plemons. Yeah.
He was good.
He was great as well. But the reason why I asked if they were actually taking a cut of it was one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood was a money laundering scheme to make like movies. $3.5 billion was involved in this, and it was crazy. The one guy who got away out of the three was a guy named Jolo, and he was out of China.
Jolo.
Yeah, Jolo.
Oh, you know him?
Legend. Oh, yeah. I mean, 1MDB, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that the fund?
Yes.
We looked into doing an episode on it. I think Sean looked into it, but it's like, it's really complicated to make financial crimes exciting. You know, I think Michael Lewis is like the only guy who can do that. But he's great. He was like in clubs buying like $90,000 worth of champagne for everyone.
I was at a dinner with him.
No.
Yes, so I got to witness it firsthand. First of all, okay, if you don't know the background of this story, it was a money laundering scheme to essentially hang out with celebrities, and what better way to do it than to make the actual movies? So he financed Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, like for real. And then it ended up being exactly like the movie in real life. We were like, what the fuck? So I was there for the opening launch of it in France. And so I went to a dinner with him. Ironically, it was him, Harvey Weinstein. I'm not going to say the other.
Yeah, I mean, those two are enough.
Those two are the criminals, so it's fine. I'm not going to tell you who else was at the dinner because it was like respectable actors who are like, oh shit. They had no idea what was going on, and neither did I, clearly. And I was like, what the fuck? But when the bill came, it was $128,000 at the end of the night. And they handed it to me, of all people. And I'm like, what? I'm like the poorest person at this fucking table. Like, no. And so I looked at my buddy and I was like, hey, man, who's going to pick this up? And he goes, oh, Jolo will pick it up. Just give it to him, whatever. He put down one card, swiped it, and I think he tipped the waitress $50,000. Because I think the total bill came out to like 178. And it was just like a 4.5-hour excursion at this club in France. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, either they have crazy money or this is all some fucking illegal scheme. Turned out to be an illegal scheme, but he fled back to China and he's still not caught to this day. So clearly China knew something was going on, but they hit him, and he's the one that's still missing from this.
Yeah, I think he was Malaysian, right? Or he stole it from a Malaysian fund.
His partner was Malaysian. Riza Aziz was his name, and his dad was one of the prime ministers of Malaysia.
Right.
He went down too, and then Jolo was Chinese. But like, if you're gonna tell me the Chinese government didn't know about this fucking guy or the meth, come on, man. Like Dan said, that's too much money. Like there's too much money going around. You know exactly what's going on there. And it's shady as shit.
It helps them kind of like politically destabilize stuff, right? So if they've got these rebel groups on the borders of theirs, just like pumping out millions of meth pills, I mean, that kind of keeps everything in a bit of chaos. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say it's them, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. What was the final verdict after you reported on it? Like it's probably them, right?
I mean, it's just, there's so many international actors involved in meth. And like, as you know, I mean, you've got these giant drug wars going on in the Philippines. Everyone in Japan's getting into like meth. You've got the Yakuza involved, the triads. Like, there's so many different guys involved in meth. It's insane. And some of it's even making its way to like the West Coast as well.
Yeah, and what I can't understand is why meth. Like, it's a shitty drug. It's not one of the fun ones. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like ecstasy or coke or anything else. At least coke wears off after a couple of hours.
I think it's probably because you can operate day to day while on meth, right?
Have you done it?
Yeah. I mean, I've taken a lot of ecstasy over the years, and that's mostly. To be honest, Adderall is about this far away from being meth as well. So the idea that you're questioning why people would use it when everybody in the United States is on it all the time is. That's naive.
Meth though is that bump up. Did you do it for the article?
Yeah, but there's no like social. There's no social faux pas in Japan or Burma about doing meth.
I think he fucking did it. You did it for the article. You had to, right?
I mean, it was all research, right? So I may or may not have freebased some weird tablets that we found in some like drug lab, and then washed it down with some weird like opium that was dyed into like kindling. It was really fucking weird. And a guy gave it to us, and we smoked it out of a didgeridoo. So
Wow.
That was a cool night out. But yeah, that was all research, obviously, guys. So now I can talk about it with authority.
No, it's like a method actor. Like I get it, dude.
It was no pun intended.
Yeah, like before Philadelphia, Tom Hanks got AIDS.
Yeah, he did. A lot of people don't know that. And then he ended up beating it too. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he and Magic Johnson, that's around the same time.
Yeah.
Money is the solution.
Money's the key. If you're rich, you can beat AIDS.
Yeah.
Lou Gaines beat it. Magic beat it. Charlie Sheen is beating it.
Now you just need fucking health insurance, but back then.
Yeah. You had to be super rich to beat AIDS. So, I'm glad you did it. What was the experience like for you?
I mean, if you've done cocaine at all, it's like a perceptibly shitter version of that. But just, it's just like something that keeps people going, like poor people in a lot of these countries, they like smoke up a load of these pills because they have to drive a truck for 40 hours or something. And they have to like work like all hours in a fucking restaurant. So that's pretty much why these people do it. And it's like 20 cents a hit. So, I mean, it's everyone's drug. It's an everyman's drug. That's why everyone loves meth.
Well, people have been, I mean, look, people in South America have been chewing on coca leaves and in Africa on cot for years. This is nothing new, right?
But it's weird though. Out of the two of you guys, I would have said it was the other one who probably did meth. Like you look like you partied at the hardest. Working for Vice and shit, like, dude.
Yeah, they've taken a weird turn, haven't they?
Yeah.
But I thought it would be funny if he drops his camera, which he's on right now, and then there's just like a didgeridoo propped up in the corner, bunch of fucking bags under, like, oh, research, got it. All right.
Yeah, we're on a school night.
Yeah, is it a school night where we are? Yeah, it's Monday. Shit. When you were at Vice, were you part of that transition when they went over to TV and everything? When they got their own TV channel?
I was in a much earlier phase, so I was there from 2013 to 2016. So I was there for the beginning of the TV show. I was there for when the HBO Weekly was there. I was not there. I was there for the start of the HBO Daily Show, but I wasn't there through that.
Got it.
I was kind of part of this like middle wave when it went from being, just dudes going around the world doing sort of, I would say like pretty sensationalized work to it having like an air of respectability. And then it changed into stuff that it's gone through like 5 waves since I was there. I can't say I'm a fan of the way they treated some of us and sort of what they became, but we all have NDAs in our past, so it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I understand. Were you there for Gavin McInnes?
No, I was not. I think he left maybe 5-6 years before I was there.
Okay. Yeah, we've tried to get him on the show before. I would probably get banned doing it now.
He's had to take some time off to regrow his goatee, I think.
Yeah. Because that's a fascinating story, too. I mean, Jesus Christ. Inventing the Proud Boys on accident and then kind of, the media using it for everything else that goes on. What's an episode that was surprising to you once you got to the bottom of it?
I think, I just did an episode on a drug called Captagon, which is it's an amphetamine as well. It's like a tiny pill that's super popular in the Middle East, in the Gulf, especially in Saudi Arabia. And I knew it was a popular drug. I had stories about it forever, but I had no idea that all of the manufacturing and trafficking was basically coming out of Syria, and that essentially Syria has become a narco state, propping up the Assad regime with like hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars of this pill being manufactured and trafficked out. And you could look up the busts that have gone on the past 3 or 4 years. You're talking about billion-dollar busts happening repeatedly, whether it's happening, I think, in Jordan or in ports in Italy and things like that. So it was kind of surprising how much of a narco state that's become. And I'm working on an episode right now about the Taliban and opium, heroin in Afghanistan, and how much of a role that opium played in that country in the past 40 years is like mind-boggling.
Right.
Like, so it's kind of, looking at these countries that you don't typically think of as narco states that are, for lack of a better term, narco states. It's been kind of surprising to see how much, how deep it actually goes and how crazy the drug war is when it comes to all these fronts. And, it really makes you think about what, I don't know where I stand on legalizing everything and whatnot. Obviously, I think like weed and a bunch of other stuff should be legal, but it really makes you think about what would happen to these markets and these countries and all these wars and all these like violent revolutionary groups. What would happen if we just legalized everything and had like a set method of dealing with it?
Right. And then there's a bunch of global effects from this stuff. I mean, to be honest, Syria becoming a narco state is not surprising at all, considering how after a lot of the hand-to-hand cash networks got shut down by international intelligence agencies, Iran and Lebanon with Hezbollah shifted to washing a lot of their money or trafficking a lot of their money through FARC in South America and some other narco-terrorist groups. And then that kind of got cut off when FARC started negotiating with the Colombian government. So I'm not surprised to see this stuff popping up. I mean, it makes sense. That is what I would do if I was Bashar al-Assad, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and Hezbollah is involved with the trafficking too. I mean, they run a huge network of the Captagon stuff, and they've always had the thing with South America and the West Africa cocaine connection and stuff coming in from there. So it's just these things. I think with the stories that we haven't actually reported on in person, when you have a surface level understanding of it, like I did with Opium in Afghanistan, and you really take the time to read 40 years worth of reporting and policy papers and intel work, you can learn some really fascinating stuff to see how all this stuff plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of goes back to drugs, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of it. Kind of
so much of it does. Yeah,
it kind of seems like crazy. You guys just continue to do research on drugs so you can go get fucked up.
Yeah, did we solve that today? Is this the crime that we solved today? That you guys are just drug addicts, and then it's just like, hey, who can we get to fund us to do more drugs around the world?
Hey, if you can turn your fucking
give away
hobby,
the secret.
Yeah, if you can turn your hobby into a full-time job, why not? Right?
Yeah,
that's a
they
dream.
Say, do what you love, right? And then everything will work out.
You'll never work a day in your life. You miss 1,000% of the shots you don't take, or whatever. Obviously, that was Lee Harvey Oswald. But have you guys ever covered a subject and then people hit you up who were actually in it, like in these gangs and shit like that, and threaten you guys?
I've had stuff online with like jihadi groups and things like that. I don't take it too seriously. The guys that are online threatening you aren't usually the ones that are gonna do something. And I don't think like Al Qaeda or some jihadi group is gonna bother with me in New York City, right? They don't really have the capacity. I've done a lot of stuff on MS-13 too. I've been down there, and you'll have people talk shit to you on like Twitter or social media or YouTube comments, but for the most part, I think I've stayed relatively clear of people that I was actually, a lot of it's just bluster. The people that are going to do shit aren't going to openly threaten you and then actually do it. I think the people that are mostly going to do that are smarter about that situation.
I think that like we've like both between us, we've covered a bunch of war zones, like active kind of like front lines. And sometimes it's more scary to follow organized crime because you kind of know where the battle is, where the front lines, and you know where your allies are in a war zone. But when you're following kind of like gangsters and people like that, usually in urban centers, you kind of get wind of the fact that you might be in danger, but you don't really know when it's going to happen. And it's all about incentive, right? So who's really in a massive mafia going to give a shit whether you live or die? So that can become quite hairy. And I mean, like, we do our thing, but Christ, the guys down in Mexico and Colombia and whatnot doing journalism down there, they're just doing incredible work.
Yeah, that's always what the concern is, right? Like I'll go to El Salvador, or I'll go to Syria, or I'll go to northern Iraq, and I can always leave after a couple of weeks, right? And I usually do leave after like a month or 2 weeks or whatever it is. The guys that are helping me on the ground, that's a big thing in El Salvador too. The guys that are setting stuff up for me on the ground, like the fixers that you use, the local reporters that help you set things up, that maybe translate and do all that, those guys I'm worried about. Because if I come home and I'm, if I'm down there and I'm doing something deceitful and then I air it out and I'm not honest about the way I was reporting, or I do something that could piss off MS-13 or 18th Street, it's going to fall on the guys that were helping me out that live in those neighborhoods, that can't get away, that if they get killed, it's not really an international news story, where if some American journalist down there gets killed, it is, which kind of, in Latin America with whether it's Mexican narcos or El Salvador, there's kind of like a barrier between that, right? Like they kind of don't want that attention.
Well, that's nothing new, though. Even the American
Mm.
mafia, American organized crime, has had rules about killing judges and police officers for over 100 years now. You know what I mean? Just for that reason, because they don't want the fucking heat.
Sean just did a story on in Holland where they killed a famous crime journalist. What, 4 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it was really, really soon. It was July 6th or something like that. They killed this really famous crime reporter, had a TV show kind of unmasking all of the mafia guys there. And there's this huge trial. Guys should look it up. It's really, really interesting, called the Morengo Trial. And I mean, if people don't know already, the Netherlands is the place for drugs in Europe and North Africa. Everything's coming through the docks, the airport. And this trial was just taking in all of these Moroccan mafia members, and he got shot in the middle of Amsterdam, broad daylight. And he's not even the first to get killed around this trial. I think there's 3 others. So it's pretty crazy, actually. I mean, we think of Holland as nice red light district, fun times and coffee houses and stuff like that. But I mean, there's a pretty seedy side to that too.
Mm. Yeah, and again, you're back to the common theme of drugs again for you, and it just doesn't fucking end, dude. It's just a lot of drugs.
I don't blame you. I'm on drugs all the time.
Yeah. Dan's smoking weed right now.
Yeah,
so
that's right, man.
It's just another day at the fucking job. But with his Netherlands thing, that's surprising, I guess, because you don't think of it as some violent country, but you're saying all the drugs are coming out of there.
The main place for drugs coming into Europe is the port of Rotterdam, which I think is one of the biggest in the world. I reckon the 9, it's in the top 10, but the 9 biggest ones are in China or whatever.
Right.
And you get all these drugs coming over from Liberia and West Africa. That's where a load of drugs get stopped on the way. It comes from all the way from Asia or South America. But yeah, it's a huge, huge place. And even when I was covering the story about this Nigerian cult crime group that's all over the world, they back in the day were just getting Nigerian baggage handlers at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam to just take off massive suitcases full of cocaine and to take it straight from South Africa. And that's a Nigerian gang. So imagine what the Europeans are doing.
Yeah, for sure. Man. I mean, you don't happen to have their number, do you?
Yeah.
I've got a couple of numbers, but they're not very happy with them.
Research.
So, no.
Yeah, for research.
Yeah, but they don't know who I am. I'm
research.
Just a consumer here.
Yeah.
No judgment zone.
I'm going to switch to one that I was listening to about a Bitcoin heist. All of our employees here are deep into the Bitcoin. I finally got in on it once it dropped, and I was like, all right, let's find out. Holy shit. It's tripled in fucking 3 or 4 months for me, where I'm just, it's hard to wrap your mind around. With this Bitcoin heist, tell everybody about that episode, because this is the next level for us. We're gonna get into some wild Bitcoin shit. I have a feeling for a while, right?
There's 2 episodes we did on that, right? There's the one that you did on those guys who actually stole the computers, and there's one that I did about scammers in general, where these kids in New York, these kids who I knew from my neighborhood, it's the Bitcoin blood gangs.
Yes.
Where these are 16, 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids who are the kind of kids who would usually be out on the street selling drugs, right? Mm-hmm. But they kind of wised up to Bitcoin early. We're talking 2013, 2014. And what it was that, it used to be back in the day, you see these articles about Target credit cards getting hacked, or, Roy Rogers credit cards getting hacked, or whatever. Anytime a department store credit card gets hacked, used to be, that was dark web, right? You had to go onto the dark web. It'd usually be Eastern European guys in Moldova, Russia, Latvia, and you'd be able to buy massive amounts of these credit card numbers. But you had to have some inkling on how to be a hacker, how to get into the dark web and all that stuff. Crypto changed that. Right? These guys had websites you could go on back then, and it was like Amazon. You could type in a zip code of credit cards you wanted to get. You could buy, 300 for $5 or whatever, just because you could buy them in Bitcoin, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, you really couldn't do anything about it. So these kids in New York, and I am talking 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, these kids who would be in street crews, street gangs, or whatever else, they kind of wised up to this. And they also realized that you could buy them with Bitcoin. And, if you get prosecuted for credit card fraud, if you get arrested for this sort of thing, it's not a gun charge, right? It's not a violent crime. You're not getting a lot of years.
Also, you're out on bail for the entire trial unless they can demonstrate a flight risk. If you're 16, 17, even if you're being tried as an adult, you're out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
it's a lot less risky than beefing over territory, than selling drugs, all that sort of stuff. So these kids wised up to it. And what they would do is that they would use Bitcoin. And this was back in the day, in like 2014, 2015, there were only a couple Bitcoin ATMs in the city. And they were all in New York City. And they were all in like really rough neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Not the kind of place that like yuppie hackers would go. Like I'm talking some of the really crime-ridden places like East New York, Brownsville, the South Bronx, things like that. So these kids would go and they would use Bitcoin to buy a whole bunch of these credit card numbers. They would have their own sort of manufacturing thing, you know, where you laminate and do whatever else. They would print out all these credit cards and they would send other people, like younger kids, whoever else they could, kind of mules, if you will, out to buy, you know, tons of gift cards in Jersey on these credit cards, which they would then flip for a fraction of the price. Or they would go to Saks Fifth Avenue and buy a ton of clothes with them, things like that. And these kids were making money. Like I had detectives in Brooklyn tell me off the record that they think crime was down in those years, 2015, 2016, because these gangs were making so much money. They didn't need to be fighting over anything else. But they did have, like, there were beefs over territory, over where you could use the credit cards, over which Bitcoin ATMs you could use. And you can Google this. You'll see stories about the takedowns in Brooklyn and whatever else, where they went after some of these gangs. They would catch them with like hundreds of credit cards and the machines that print the credit cards out. And, you know, I ended up knowing a couple kids who were involved in this just because in my neighborhood. Yeah, and I never I wanted to make a documentary about it, but they kind of disappeared after a while and I couldn't get the funding for it. But yeah, it was really innovative because these aren't kids that you think of as knowing how to do this kind of stuff. You know, they're kind of, they were outsmarting way smarter, you know, cybersecurity guys and really figuring this stuff out. It was a fascinating story.
For the audience, estimate how much money these kids actually made.
I mean, we're talking like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I couldn't put a good estimate on it, but, you know, $100,000 for each one of these crews. And they would get caught with this money. You know, I'm talking dozens of credit cards, you know, running up thousands of dollar credit card bills on each one of these cards. So they were making bank. I mean, we're not talking like tens of millions, but they were doing pretty well for themselves. More than you could do like street dealing crack or cocaine.
Right, with essentially no exposure, right? I mean, and then what is that? It brings up a good question because you're kind of leaning towards or hinting towards this new you know, organized crime, digital organized crime. What does that look like for turf wars, right? So what's the new turf war going to be? Because that's going to be the interesting point that people like you report on. People will listen about tracking numbers for so long, but they're not going to pay a whole lot of attention until there's violence involved, right? I mean, that's just kind of how it works with human beings. So where does the violence come in at that point? Because, I mean, you're operating teams of hackers. If you're an organized crime boss, for example, you're not doing any real work. You have people doing that, preferably somebody that's far enough away from you that they can't land on you unless they use RICO or something like that. So that's the case. What is the violence? Where does the violence come in? Because it will, right?
Yeah. Well, the smart gangs. I mean, even you look at like Russian mob stuff in the last couple of years. Like they're doing white collar crimes. Right. They've smartened up, and there's so much fraud. Healthcare fraud is huge. I mean, healthcare fraud. The Russian mafia types that were running out of Brighton Beach in Brooklyn. We're talking billions of dollars over like a decade. Like these are gigantic scams. But if you look at violent crime right now in New York City, or I've done a bunch of reporting in St. Louis, which has the highest murder rate in the U.S. and has for the past 7 years. You know, it's not, and you'll talk to the old heads and they talk about this, and they think it's kind of stupid because it's not crews really beefing over money, right? It's like really dumb block shit over reputations, over fights starting out over Instagram and things like that. And that's what you see. Like, a lot of the murder rise you've seen, or the murder rates that are happening in New York City in the worst neighborhoods, in St. Louis, which is the deadliest city in America, it's over stupid crew shit. You know, it's over block to block stuff, stupid beefs. It's not over money. It's not over territory. And you talk to some of these guys, you know, what they call the OGs that are 40, 50, 60 years old. And they're like, yo, when we used to do this stuff, yeah, we were violent too. But it was over money. It was always over money and over business. It wasn't over this dumb shit. And they can't, like, they don't understand it.
It's funny. So one of our producers back here, Hot Bob, he's a St. Louis guy. Nothing has made my heart happier than when you said that St. Louis is the murder capital of the world.
Oh, yeah.
There's a caveat to that, though, and they only draw statistics from St. Louis City, which is like a specific part of the metro. So
that's what they always say.
Yeah.
If you bring in the suburbs of any city, it's gonna bring it down. But if you do bring up the suburbs of St. Louis and bring in the entire metro area, it's still one of the highest murder rates in the U.S. And North St. Louis, which is where the majority of the crimes are where the majority of the murders happen. If you break that down by neighborhood and population, it's by far, we're talking a murder rate over 100. We're talking a higher murder rate than El Salvador and its worst years and all that. I mean, that's a deadlier place than the south side of Chicago.
No, I agree. It's just for perspective. People don't know that area is a population of like 300,000. So like if you did it for like Austin, Texas, like that's the whole city. It's like 1 million plus 1.5. It's like it is an extremely dangerous place. I'm not discounting that, but there is a weird statistical anomaly within that where it's a smaller group of data being drawn from than a normal city.
And how many people has Nelly killed on his own?
Hey, first off, Nelly's from University City, which is in the suburbs where I'm from. So.
All right. Well, look, I can say this from experience.
Wait, are you calling Nelly a poser on this show? Because I'll put a Band-Aid on right now.
I'll put a Band-Aid on underneath my eye in a second here. But yeah, all the places we've traveled, St. Louis, actually, that is the only time I went to, I forget I was shooting a movie there. And when we got to check in, I thought it was a decent hotel. We had to do this thing downtown. And they go, hey, we just want to give you a heads up. We charge a little bit more for parking overnight. And I was like, okay, why? And they were like, well, we got to have 2 guys sit out and watch the parking lot where your cars are, or they will definitely get stolen. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah. And they don't technically work for the hotel. They work for the parking lot themselves. And like, they knew the people in those surrounding neighborhoods or whatever. And sure enough, these 2 guys just sat in this fucking booth all night and watched the goddamn cars. I was like, Jesus Christ, man.
Look, you haven't lived until you've walked into a strip club where the bouncer has an AR-15. All right.
Is that St. Louis?
Yeah, East St. Louis.
Yeah.
I'm down with that.
I don't want to badmouth St. Louis. I love St. Louis. It's a great city, but it is a scary place, especially the north and especially at night.
No, the north is terrifying.
Let's go hang out there.
Let's just do a live show there, and then at night, and then south side of Chicago, and see how we end up.
If I do a live show in St. Louis at night, all you're going to see are 2 green eyeballs going through the air, my man, because it's going to be under night vision, 100%. I'm not walking through there.
That's hilarious. Speaking of which, what are you guys married, and what do your girlfriends and or wives think of what you do for a living? Because I imagine it's got to be hard saying, hey, hon, I'm going to go to Burma for like 3 weeks and do meth.
Yeah, by the way,
if
anybody that looks Asian comes by, don't talk to them because it's probably a triad trying to murder me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was married, so that tells you everything. I was married to one of your compatriots, actually. She was from Oklahoma. So I got a very interesting insight into your country, but that is over. And the meth did not help.
Well, yeah, was it because of what you did for a living, or I mean, like for real?
No, I'm just a complete prick. No, not really, but it does. I mean, I don't know. Like, I've got a girlfriend now, and she respects it. And I've just been out in Ethiopia covering the civil war there, and I don't know. Like, I think there are actually jobs that are even more dangerous. Like, we have some crazy stories, and we get into some scrapes, but I think a lot of the time, if you've got your wits about you, you're pretty much all right. I don't know, though. Saying that, I think I've had a couple of close misses. So,
yeah, I will say, I mean, the traveling when you're seeing someone gets to be a pain in the ass if you're away for like 2 weeks every month and a half. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, like, it is definitely one of those jobs where, women appreciate what you do, and like I think they find the kind of work that you do and everything like that attractive. Like, it's definitely not a bad thing. I'll say that much.
I'm not going to say that I didn't put a picture of me in a flak jacket on Tinder the last time I Tinder.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you got to use it. I mean, if you're going to do it, do it.
You gotta be humble about it, though. It can't be your first picture. It's got to be like your third one. So it's not like
that was exactly what it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. How is Ethiopia these days?
Oof.
Not good. I think Afghanistan's taken a lot of the air out of the story, but it's awful. Breakaway state, kind of former rulers of the country, so they basically had it down on the military for like 30 years. So all of the personnel, I mean, anyone with half a fucking brain in the Ethiopian army was from that region, Tigray. They've got loads of material left over from the Cold War era where various sides are getting backed up by the Soviets and the Americans and whatnot. And no one's going to back down. I mean, the rebels in the north, they want to take over the whole country. You've got Eritrea, which is just this tin pot shithole on the north side of that, it's an army posing as a country. They're basically now invading like up to 200 kilometers south of the border, which I found out there, and they're committing all kinds of hideous atrocities like mass rapes and murders. And then the government in Addis Ababa is like, fuck all the world, we don't care, we're going to kill these guys, but they're not going to do that because the rebels have taken over all the cities already.
Well, the rebels you're talking about,
nothing's going to change.
The rebels you're talking about in Eritrea, that's primarily ISIS, right? From what I understand, they're all over the place there.
There's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, the whole of the Horn of Africa, there's a lot of stuff going on with like extremist groups, kind of Al-Shabaab. Obviously the stuff in Yemen is spilling over, and there's a lot of like money, and you might have seen in like Mozambique, which is not far away, some ISIS insurgents took over an entire city. That's all about oil. So it's pretty screwed up there. And now, I mean, the only country that's anyway democratic in that region is Kenya, and they do fuck all anyway. So I'm not holding out a lot of hope, and it was pretty grim when I was out there as well. Yeah, it's not a happy story, that one.
Yeah, it never is. I've never heard like a positive Ethiopian story since Farm Aid, I guess. But let me ask you this: as a white guy going over there, do they? I mean, they have to know either you're a journalist or you're building some fucking water fountain, right?
You're a missionary journalist or intelligence officer. That's what the presumption typically is.
That's funny. That's funny because 2 of my recent trips, I've cosplayed as a missionary, so that kind of worked well. I had my hand on a Bible in Burma, pretending I was out there to kind of like proselytize the locals, and it seemed to work. And then a guy that I was with was like, "We're going to pretend to be Australian bikie, like meth dealers." So we sat down with these smugglers. I'm like, "Mate, we're both fucking British. We don't sound anything like Australians." I don't know why he didn't just say we were British drug smugglers, but
why did you go along with
and they didn't seem to clock it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know why he did it.
I'm not sure.
Why did you go along with it?
I'm not sure the average Ethiopian can tell the difference between those 2 accents, to be honest.
I mean, I can't half the time.
Yeah.
Until they start saying crikey, I mean, that's a dead giveaway right there. Or if they pull out a knife and start challenging whether or not my knife is actually a knife, usually you know that's an Australian as well.
Yeah.
I think
that's a giveaway.
And the leathery skin.
Obviously. So are you married? You have a girlfriend, you said?
No, I had a long-time girlfriend for a while, but yeah, the travel, she appreciated what I did, so it was kind of like it was a nice bonus thing right now. But no, I'm unattached.
Okay. And what's the most dangerous shit you've done? Have you ever almost been killed on one of these things?
Yeah, I did a lot of war coverage. I did a thing, so the bullets, bombs, and all that don't scare me as much as gauging whether or not I can trust the person that I'm with to not kidnap me or turn me over to someone.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part. Generally, when you're interviewing like MS-13 or whatever else, like I said, there's like almost like an aura, not of invincibility, but you're okay. But when you're in the Middle East, like, I'm a white American guy, with a fairly obvious Jewish name, like I am fucking top dollar for anyone out there to grab a hold of. So I had a situation where I was able to, I was in Syria in 2013 in a city called Ras El Ain, which was divided between, Syrian rebel groups and a group called the YPG, which are the PKK. Yep. And both of them were relatively anti-Assad, but they were kind of fighting each other.
Well, the PKK is a terrorist organization. I mean, they've been around for quite a while, right? Yeah,
they're a terrorist organization in Syria, but in Turkey. In Turkey, but in Syria, they're the YPG, and they were our allies, and freedom fighter, terrorist, all that sort of stuff in Turkey. But I was with these Syrian rebel groups who I was hanging out with, and it was I wrote an article about it for Esquire, and it was really illuminating because these kids I was with were not, they weren't bloodthirsty types. They weren't what you think of when you think of a rebel. They were kids, like 22-year-olds, and I'm hanging out with them at night, and it was kind of like the downtime of their era, and, they're smoking cigarettes, some of them are smoking shitty weed, and they're all just busting balls. Like, I felt like I was with my college friends again. They're making fun of this guy because he only dates ugly girls. They're making fun of this guy because he like dresses weird. And you really have this realization that, like, damn, if I was born here 25 years ago, I could just be one of these kids. Like, they're just like me. I mean, look, obviously they have different cultures and some of them are a little more religious, and it's just a weird place to be. But it was really illuminating. But through those guys, there was another group there. At the time, it was called Jabhat al-Nusra. And everyone was talking about how they were basically the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. It wasn't declared until a couple of days after I left. But through them, they had like a sort of tenuous alliance at the time because they were both fighting Assad and both fighting the YPG. And these guys were like, hey, do you want to go interview these guys? Like, we'll protect you. You can go talk to what's basically Al-Qaeda and interview them. And, I went along with it. And I sat down in a room with these two guys who spoke English. Mm-hmm. And we're basically in Al-Qaeda, and we had an interview, me and the photographer I was with. They told us not to record them. They told us that it was just a conversation that they wanted to have to tell us what they were really about. They were doing the PR thing. But I excused myself to the bathroom in the beginning. I turned on a tape recorder. I put it in my front shirt pocket, and I went back. And we just kind of sat down with these guys and had a conversation with them for an hour, which, they're fucking jihadis. They're completely out of their mind. But I remember going back to the house I was sleeping in that night, staying with one of these rebel guys, and I was like, if these guys really want to get us, like, they can come get us, and there's nothing these guys, like, are these rebels that we're cool with, are they really going to fight for our lives? Mm-hmm. Like, if it puts them, so, it's situations like that where you're in this sort of thing, and maybe it's calm all around you, but you don't know if you can trust the people you're with or anyone else. Like, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night when I'm reporting. Mm-hmm. And Ebola, it was fucking sucked.
Oh, you had it?
No, I didn't have it. I was in the middle of the Ebola hot zone. My cameraman got it after I left.
Oh, and
we weren't sure. Ashoka, you can look him up. He was airlifted from Liberia to the U.S. So we're not sure if he got it after I was there and he was working with another crew, or he got it while I was with him. But, I'm in Brooklyn. I'm like isolating myself in my apartment just to make sure, quarantining myself for 21 days so I don't get it. It's right around the time that doctor catches it, and he had gone out the night before and he comes down with it. And I'm like, I don't want to be that asshole on the cover of the New York Post where they're like, idiot vice guy brings back Ebola and spreads it in the city. Like, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
So that was, and Ebola too, every time you get like a little fluctuation in your stomach or you feel like a little slight temperature rise, you're like, holy fuck, I've got Ebola. My life is over. Everyone's going to hate me. I'm public enemy number one. So those two things
you really don't want to be that asshole, right? Don't you shit blood and piss blood out of your eyes and stuff like this with Ebola?
It's a brutal disease. It's actually very hard to catch. It's not an easy disease to catch, but try telling that to somebody when you've just gotten back from Liberia. They don't want to hear that shit.
No, definitely not. Is there a story out there that you guys are working on that we should be aware of that maybe like the common man doesn't know?
That's a good one.
Good question. I mean, yeah, I don't know.
They're going in their head right now. They're like, what can I say and not give this whole thing away?
Yeah. I'm trying to like pitch myself to an editor right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to get the info from my own knowledge,
like the war in French Tahiti, guys, that's really fucking bad. Any editors listening, that's really going down.
I think the St. Louis thing, actually, I did a documentary on it, but it just doesn't get any coverage.
No, it's all South Chicago, right?
Right, it's all South Chicago, and the murder rate in St. Louis is 4 times that of Chicago. And
it's always been like that, though, right? I don't mean with St. Louis and Chicago, but even back in the day when Detroit was far and away more dangerous than any city in the country, it was New York that caught all the heat for it, like in the 90s.
Right. Well, what it is New York had the highest total murders, not the highest murder rate, So, but yeah, people just like ignore St. Louis, and it's this fascinating, story. It's not just about the murder rate; it's about this like Rust Belt city. It's got a higher population loss than Detroit over the past 50 years, which people don't know about either. it's just like a fascinating coming together. Crazy opioid problem, tons of guns on the streets. And I also want to make clear that it's a great city and there's a lot going on there. But it's this fascinating story of this American city that unfortunately is in decline a bit, that's trying to bounce back. And it just doesn't get any coverage in New York or in California, in these coastal media enclaves that it's just ignored. And I've tried pitching it to I've talked to a bunch of magazines. They're just not interested in it, which, I think there should be a lot more coverage of what's going on there.
So I'll give you mine, right? I've had this, I'm not a big conspiracy guy at all, but I've been convinced that Kim Jong-un has been dead for a year. Dead serious. And I think that it's a lookalike guy. And because he disappeared for 3-4 months or whatever it was. And then the new guy who popped up, they were like, oh man, he's looking thinner and thinner. And I was like, because it's not him. I think he's fucking dead.
But how do you even get in?
Just give the guy a break. He's just done a keto diet or something like that. He's put himself in decent shape. Yeah. I mean,
he's improving his life and you're hating on him for it because you're jealous that he's taking the initiative to improve his life.
I know. For whatever reason, man, I think he fucking died. And
how do you prove that? It's not like we've got his DNA on file. I mean, we could snatch up one of his relatives, I guess.
Well, my thing is why couldn't we prove it? Because you were over in Iraq, obviously, and Saddam Hussein had what, 30 lookalikes or
80 plus, I think. But some of them, there was a core group of ones that actually looked like him, and then people that looked like him from far away that he would send on other presidential operation where he never left the vehicle, like he was just waving from the top of an airplane, or he was in his car driving by for a parade or some shit.
Right.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But and that's the same thing I think is probably happening there.
Maybe.
And that's my guess.
I mean, they've all got the same haircut.
Super fucking weird.
The only way you could really tell is to cut him in half and count the rings. I think that's how that works, right?
Yeah.
So how are you going to get that close?
Trump was.
Yeah, well.
He was the only one.
I don't think he's ever operated a power tool or a hatchet or anything like that. How's he going to cut the guy in half, right?
Man, there's so many ways. Speaking of cutting guys in half.
Can you imagine him bringing out a katana like Kill Bill and just slicing that motherfucker in half?
Great.
Holy shit.
It'd be great to see. It'd be great television. Put that on pay-per-view.
Yeah, why not?
But you guys have seen heads getting chopped off and all that shit, one would imagine, right? Covering all these places?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen heads getting chopped off, but you see, definitely bodies and people being killed or bleeding out from stuff.
After the fact? Did you ever see somebody get killed in front of you on one of these stories?
I've seen people, when I was in the Central African Republic in late 2013, and we were in the middle of what ended up being a small firefight, and the guy we came up on, was bleeding out, and we couldn't get him to safety or anything like that. Eventually, while we had to run at night, we ended up in a French a church that everyone was hiding in, and the French forces there had to come and rescue us at one point, but they brought that guy in later, and he bled out, unfortunately. So things like that. I was in the city of Kobani, which was under siege from ISIS in the end of 2014, which another one of the craziest experiences of my life. And you've got bodies there from just laying out there from everything and stuff like that. Disposal, things of that nature,
I saw some people getting shot in Tahrir Square when I was covering the Arab Spring. I think the worst one, I was covering the drug war in the Philippines. I used to go out there all the time. I really love that country, and we would have this police contact, and we would stay down the police station from midnight till 8 a.m. We just get all these calls another body dropped. I don't know if you know much about the drug war. There was a point where up to 50 or 60 people a night were getting dropped every night in Manila alone. And we just go out and there'd be another body and another body and another body. And it just felt so fucking hopeless. And some of them being dropped 5-10 minutes before we showed up, because this guy was just getting mainlined information straight from the cop who just shot them. That was pretty rough. But it's kind of just after the fact. I mean, you're always kind of sweeping up the story from behind. So yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Does Africa feel that hopeless as well?
I mean, I think there's parts of it that don't feel super hopeless. Central African Republic was it's one of the poorest countries in the world. Most people haven't even heard of it. And it was a really brutal war that broke out there. It felt almost like one of those throwback things that you heard about 50 or 60 years ago. So that felt pretty hopeless. But it's a weird thing, because in these situations, especially during war, and I think if you served in Iraq, you can say the same thing. You kind of see, you see the absolute worst of humanity too. but you kind of see the best as well. You know, you see people who like will put their own life on the line to save a stranger, save somebody they've never even met. You know, maybe someone that like, especially Central African Republic, because it turned into like a sort of ethnic war along religious lines. But you would see people who were, you know, Christian or Muslim, putting their life on the line when everyone around them was trying to kill people to save those exact same people that were different from them. So it's kind of, you know, it does fuck with your head for sure. But you also see some like crazy moments where you're like, wow, these are like the best people humanity has to offer.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear because, I mean, look, you know, you'll hear one side of it all the time of like, oh, this place is a shithole. And then you wonder if there's any great people there or great experiences and things like that. I've never gone over, which is why I'm asking. Because, again, it's one thing or the other in today's media. It's either awful
it's just like
or it's great.
It's like when people talk about folks becoming rich or famous and, man, you really changed. Like, no, they didn't change. The wealth and the fame just expose their character, and chaos exposes character as well. It really does. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I've seen some of the probably most alarming and most hopeful moments in my life in combat, which seemed kind of weird to think about, but it is what it is, man.
And you touched on something too that, sorry, I was going to say that like that we talk about often. We get Sean and I are always kind of bummed that we go to these places and we cover the worst that they have to offer. You know, when like that's what people love about Bourdain, right? So you got to show these places for like how much fun you can have there, like eating a meal with people, the cultural stuff. I think that's kind of our dream is to do that, like show the worst, but also show that like life continues here and people are great and people are all really similar. Of course, you don't want to go too far on the other side and show like, oh, everything's great here when like, you know, 20 miles away, there's people killing each other because they're different than the other people. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think the story there isn't that it's a great place. It's that goodness as it is intrinsically persists regardless of the circumstance, right? That's the real story because that's what gives people hope who are good themselves and or even aspire to be good, whatever that means. It gives them
and so does badness, right?
Right, correct.
It's like the same with badness, yeah.
No matter how
like
good things get, some people will be assholes, yes.
Yeah.
One I want to ask about here is Coney. We often joke about Coney on the fucking show. Do you guys know anything about this dude and that whole shit? And is he still out there?
God, the Lord's Resistance Army. He was in Central African Republic for a while, I think. But yeah, it's not. But Uganda, right? And then he was in Central African Republic in that kind of lawless area between the CAR, Uganda, and Sudan. I don't know. Didn't they capture him or haven't?
No.
Like his army been brought down to like only 50 or 60 people?
That part is true, yeah. Last I heard it was like 300 randos cruising around, but no sign of him. And to be honest, I feel like if one of those governments had got him, though, it would be on TV.
Yes, I do too, yeah.
It's not like they have an FCC or somebody that's going to cry if they cut the dude's head off on television, right? They're just going to do whatever the fuck they want there.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Did he get... Maybe he died alone in the woods somewhere, right?
I don't know.
All I know is that all I know about Coney is the LRA and then that guy. Was he caught like wanking in public or something? The guy that made the film about him?
So the guy who set up the fundraiser for it and the T-shirts and all that shit was Coney 2012, if I remember correctly.
That's it. Yeah.
He was. You're very close. He was. He ran out of a car. At a stop sign in San Diego mid-afternoon, was buck naked running down the streets. And people had said he had a mental break, that he lost his mind, because I guess he started this thing and it was super small, and then it exploded and there was $1 gajillion donated from all over the world. And then they were questioning what he was doing with the money and why Coney hadn't gotten caught yet.
Did he actually have any plan at all to do anything with the money, or is it just like one of those like
just a grift,
either a grift or like predatory stuff, or just like hopeful, like, hey, I'm going to do something, and he's just an idiot?
That is what I want the answer to. So if you guys do that on one of your podcasts, I'd be amped to know that answer for real. Because
this isn't a concert, and they don't take requests. Okay?
No,
Fuck
you do. No. I want to hear Freebird.
Oh, we totally do.
If you get high enough on our Patreon, we'll do whatever you tell us to do.
Oh, really?
You better slow down talking to our audience like that.
Yeah, I will roll over there now and put $1,000 in to get the answer on fucking Coney and this guy.
Dude, I was thinking something way worse.
Yeah, because it's with what you do and what your podcast is all about. There's so many cool stories. It's never ending. And as we like to say here, owning a media company, it's evergreen.
Evergreen content, yeah.
So you can just go back and listen to these because they're fucking endless. And let's face it, crime and drugs and murder and all that stuff isn't going away anytime soon. No. Now with the Bitcoin shit, the violence will go down because more and more of this stuff will be behind the scenes and it's digital and everything else.
Or is there, like he's talking about more of the beef, even in some places where there's still a lot of street crime. Most of the beef isn't coming from territory anymore, but it's just coming from pride and ego online, right? So maybe this new social currency of being popular on the internet is somehow the new territory, right? If there's no other territory, there is a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
There is a violence vacuum, and it will get filled by something.
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of one of the greatest people that I should have done a story about. I was following the mob in Mumbai in India, and there was this guy who was like, I think he was about 40, and he used to go around in the 90s, and he made his own pistols at home or some shit, and he did about 50, 60 contract kills, and now he was just like bumming around. He couldn't find work because all the jobs had gone upstairs, and it was all like crypto guys and financial white-collar criminals running the game in the States. And he was like this funny. I kept imagining like the Curb Your Enthusiasm music when he was describing his like former life as an assassin. Now he just like sits around doing fuck all.
That's funny, dude. No, somebody should make a sitcom about. It's like John Cusack coming back as Grosse Point Blank, but he's an out of work assassin now. You know what I mean?
What do you do?
There's nobody to kill, man. People don't even go to work anymore. It's bullshit. He's on fucking disability.
Trying to figure out the blockchain.
he's on VA disability.
That'd be fucking great. Now's the point in the show where we get to the Drinkin' Bro of the week, which is someone who has inspired you or helped you become the person you are today. We'll start with Britain because let's face it, if it wasn't for your weakness, we wouldn't be here today. So we'll start with you.
That is true.
Who would you like to give the Drinkin' Bro of the week to?
That's such a good question. I mean, like there are so many good journalists that I was obsessed with who have kind of gone off the deep end these days. And one of them whose early work was incredible was a guy called John Pilger. Now these days he's gone a bit different, but he was one of the first reasons I got into journalism. But yeah, I don't know. I got caught in the back foot. Help me out, Danny.
I mean, Drinkin' Bros, like I would say, I'm not going to be like my grandmother. I would say Aiden Hartley is this journalist who wrote this book called The Zanzibar Chest, and it's all about him covering East Africa in the 90s, like, he's in Rwanda, he's in Ethiopia, like in palaces when people get overthrown and all this stuff. And he's just a really like funny, well-written book. And that was the book that made me want to be a journalist. So I don't think he even works anymore. I think he's like a livestock guy. But anyway, Aiden Hartley, The Zanzibar Chest, fantastic book. He's my Drinkin' Bro of the week.
Awesome. And since you brought up Bourdain a couple times, I'm just going to ask, did you watch the doc? Did you watch Roadrunner?
No, I haven't. I want to see it. The whole like AI thing, kind of, I don't like that, but I still want to see it.
Yeah, so I saw it, and I saw it opening night. My wife's a huge fan of Bourdain, and knowing the AI thing going in fucked with me, because then you find yourself trying to guess which lines were AI. I think it was just the emails. I think because obviously you wouldn't read your emails aloud.
Right.
So when you see an email on the screen and it's read aloud, I think that's it. The director not telling anybody what it was kind of pissed me off too. I just wish he would have just shut the fuck up and not no one would have been the wiser for it, It would have been a question later of like, oh, I wonder when he read that email out loud, but who cares? Yeah. You had 10,000 hours worth of footage and VO from him and it was fine. But I will say this, if you watch it, it's very good. I enjoyed it. But if you watch it, they did really go to the end and kind of clip it with, he was upset over that Asia Argento chick.
Wow.
That's where they were headed with it, and then you could tell they cut it off. I'd be curious to get real journalists' opinions of it, because they certainly asked the director afterwards when he was doing press of why you didn't go further with it, and he said, look, I wanted it to be more about his life, not about why it ended, but the people in the doc were pretty pissed off that were close to him. That's all I'll say.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's definitely worth the watch. Yeah, and it's really fucking good. And they showed footage to back up why, the fights and things he was having with this girl and why and everything. And it was interesting from two different standpoints of not only just her, but him as well. He just felt like ridiculously in love with this girl who was just too old for her. So yeah, check it out, because I'd be curious to get like real journalist thoughts on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool.
Because he is a fascinating figure, and shit, he was doing the food version of what you guys do in real life, except you guys are doing the dangerous shit, and he's just eating he's eating ramen in fucking Vietnam with Obama and shit. So
we can.
He's perfect. He gets the time right every time. Like, he's thoughtful. He has a good time. He's a really good laugh. Like, he's just brilliant. Yeah,
and that's what my wife loved about him. And then obviously behind the scenes, he was complex, and a lot of the questions I was asking you guys about today seemed like it went on in his life, where you travel that much. Because we tried to get him on an episode 3 or 4 years ago, and his agent was just like, look, man, he's just so fucking busy, and he's around the world all the time. He just doesn't have time for anything or anyone, essentially.
Yeah, oddly enough, same thing with Mike Rowe.
Yeah.
He's like, Mike Rowe is like the kind of, I don't know what you would call it, I guess the experiential journalist now, for lack of a better phrase, where it's not quite gonzo. He's not getting high. He's just going there and experiencing things and then communicating that back to people somehow, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting style of stuff. But the problem is you can't get that motherfucker on the phone.
No.
He's always somewhere doing something.
Yep. Always.
Constantly.
Always. And that's what we enjoy about your podcast is, the things that you guys are talking about, a lot of the stuff you actually reported on and or did. It is fantastic. It is called The Underworld. Guys, we really appreciate you being on today. Tell everybody where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, go on, Danny.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Honestly, this was a really fun interview. We are the Underworld Podcast. You can search for us on any podcast app. We have the Instagram account. The Twitter account is underworld_pod. You can email us if you want, the underworldpodcast@gmail.com. I am DG is serious on Twitter. I think that covers it, right?
Yeah, I'm S. Williams Journal on Twitter. And we do take requests, guys. So if you email in, you might even get your own show on there in the future.
If you up that Patreon, hit that $50 a month.
Yeah, you've got to be in there.
We'll do anything you say. Like if you're a mafia boss that has an enemy that you want us to report on, hit that $50 mark. We'll do that. Like, we're ready.
Okay,
Patreon.com
this is where
the Underworld Podcast.
This is where journalism now, it's like costs you a $50 Patreon subscription to see what you want. I think
you're about to get a $50 hit, and I'm just going to write Coney 2012 in there. I want the fucking answer on this guy.
What about if that maybe Harambe was an inside job somehow?
Oh, yes. Right? I'm sure you'll get
Harambe was 100% an inside job.
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher did that whole butterfly effect thing, and that was this is the best case scenario, was that Harambe had to die. And still we had a pandemic and fucking all this bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? But if he had fucking let Harambe live, Harambe would be tearing people's heads off right now.
It's kind of where the world ended, I think. Yeah. When the day he died was when our world changed forever. R.I.P., obviously.
Well, what are you going to do?
Check out the Underworld podcast wherever podcasts are available, and check out their Patreon. For D'Anthony Holloway, I am Ross Patterson. This is the Drinkin' Bros podcast. Good night, everyone.